Chronometry calibrated. The gateway will open in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Analyzing data. Likelihood of parallel universes now at 6%. Continuing analysis of the many worlds hypothesis.
Now more than ever, illusions of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. In times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish record podcasts. Welcome everyone, I'm Gayfesh. Joining me as always is the lovely DemonMama.
Hello.
And Moss.
Hello.
And today we are taking a brief detour from Captain America's story to focus on Captain Wakanda, or as he's better known, Black Panther. And Moss, I appreciate you giving the salute and not the culturally appropriative X cross. You gotta be black if you want to do that one.
Yep, true.
You do? I thought we lived in Ruth Conda forever.
Well, okay.
And what happened to building bridges and being together, huh? We're off on a bad start thematically.
I watched the movie twice, and on the second viewing, when I noticed that Shuri had Ross do the X, she's like, make an X with your arms, now break it. I'm like, wait, he can't do that.
Yes, he can. That's
white.
the message. That's the message. Even the CIA can do the Ruth Conda forever.
True.
All right, so let's get into this one. DemonMama, I know this was your first time watching this movie. What are your initial thoughts on Wakanda?
Fine. It was fine. I don't know. There were some things I really liked about it, and there were some things I was just like, oh man, I'm getting tired of this Marvel shit. And the parts that I really liked about this movie was the costume work.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, goddamn, finally, some good fucking food. It was like, I mean, I think it's probably because it's so out of the like standard milieu of like the other Marvel movies that they were like, oh, we really need to like think about what we're doing with the costuming here and hire some people who like are gonna think about this, because like it was
And
really
we're not going to wash
level.
out our pigments.
Yeah, that's true too. It was like, which was great. There was a lot more attention paid to that. It is a very colorful movie. It especially shows in the costuming, which is good to see, and I really like that. Like, I really think it was above and beyond. I have like a bunch of the specific costumes from the movie like lodged in my mind. I'm thinking of like the River Tribe people with their like all the green gems and the big lip piercing and
The lip plates.
The lip plates, yeah, that's what they're called.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was like, that is so cool. I was thinking of the Border Tribe warriors, where they have these like big flowing silken cloaks that turn into shields. I was like, oh man, they really thought about it, and they thought about how like the costumes might be used to fit the roles of the people. I forgot the name of the mountain tribe.
Jabari.
The Jabari.
Jabari. They were like all like the furs and the bound bones and all of that was just really awesome. Also, I was the whole movie like 4 separate times I kept saying M'Baku's weapon is the coolest weapon in the entire movie.
It's pretty cool.
It's like, I think it's called like a knob keely or something along those lines, is like the type of weapon.
It has a club on one end and a pointy stick at the other end.
Yeah,
so it's,
and I was like, I was reading a bunch of threads about people trying to figure out like what if it's like inspired by a real weapon. And it seems to be. I was like, it's kind of like a shillelagh, but different, because shillelaghs usually don't have like a ball at the end. And they kind of are more like knobbish and rough. But anyway, it was super cool. So I really liked all that. As for everything else about the movie, I liked a lot of it less than I would have liked to have. I will get into all the stuff that I have, all my feelings about the narrative and whatever.
Sure.
I feel like it fell flat in a lot of ways, which sucked, because it felt like the movie was reaching for certain really big themes and just couldn't really execute on them in a way that I felt was appropriate to those themes.
Sure.
And also, yeah, and also the CGI in this movie was unbearable.
Oh God,
it
the
was
bridge fight at the end. They had 6 weeks to do that. That's why it looks like a PlayStation fight. Yeah,
yeah. It looks terrible. There was also just like this. I got legitimately angry when it was like for like half the movie they keep going back to this like memory of Killmonger, and he's like, you have to see the sunsets in Wakanda. And he's like, someday I'll see that sunset. And then they go to the sunset and it's a full CGI sunset and location. And it looks like it has like really bad looking depth. I'm just like, why didn't you just go to a mountain, any mountain, and shoot a sunset? Is it
Just
that hard?
get
You're
a
like
second unit to go out to Africa and find a cool location to get a sunset there. You know,
there's lots like of 8 them. Times I was screaming. I'm like, I want to see a tree, a real tree. Let me see a fucking tree. I don't know why it's so hard. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's just this is where I was like, this is why I said I felt like I was kind of like, God, I'm getting tired of this Marvel stuff, because I'm just like, this is not filmmaking. When you're like, we're setting a movie in Africa and we're going to make it about like African issues, but we're not going to like capture even like a single shot of the locations that were like you. It's just, come on now. Like, anyway,
yeah, I gotcha.
That's all. There's my summary. I'll get into everything else later.
Moss, what are your first thoughts?
Yeah, I am hoping that over the course of this conversation, I am able to clarify my feelings about this movie, because right now I feel like I don't know whether I like this movie or not, which I guess means that I don't like this movie. Which I guess is not to say that I actively dislike it, but I feel like I enjoyed it a lot when we saw it in theaters when it first came out. But like upon rewatching and like now that some time has passed, I do think that there were a lot of things about it that were just kind of annoying and feel really snarky, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm not really sure how to describe my feelings about it. Like, there are a lot of things that are really cool. I'm maybe wondering if like the acting didn't quite catch me the same way, because I think the accent work could have been more consistent across the cast. Like maybe it was something about performing the movie in this, dialect that doesn't really exist.
I think that like, because like the Jabari, I don't think they speak Xhosa. I think they speak a different language too. So that like each of the different tribes probably have their own dialects. So like,
that's fair.
You might have different accents there.
Yeah. So I'm not really sure what about it. It just like a lot of things about this movie fell very flat for me. And I watched it twice this weekend. I just finished with this my second watch through this morning. Like, why do I not like this movie is I think where I'm sitting. And I would, at this point, if in my own personal life, I would go and watch a bunch of video essays to try to help me understand why I don't like this movie. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there are good things about it. I like the technology stuff. The sci-fi aspect of it is pretty cool. The world building in terms of like the, differentiating the tribes, very cool. But overall, I just feel very dissatisfied for some reason that I'm having a hard time articulating.
Before I get into the many issues that I have with this movie as the latest example in a long line of examples of Marvel's fundamental failure to address political issues by defaulting to status quo liberalism, I want to get into the artistry of this movie. We've talked about the costumes. We talked about how it's nice to actually see a colorful Marvel movie for once, because the last one we saw, Civil War, the big action set piece was in a big gray airport, and then the final fight was in a big gray hangar where a bunch of people in desaturated costumes are desaturatedly punching each other. Whereas here we actually have some actual color, and when you get the color contrast, usually like most movies are going to go for the blue and the orange, but here you get like purple and yellow. It's changes things up. It feels a bit different. But the music, oh my God, the music in this movie, I cannot say enough good things about this. Ludwig Göransson is like, he's the GOAT. Okay. That dude's done everything, right? Like that dude's the reason Oppenheimer won the Oscar.
He did do Oppenheimer. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I know this guy's work. I was trying to remember. I was like, was he Andor or was he?
He did Andor. Did he do it? Right? I think he did it. I know he did Mandalorian. I don't know if he did Andor. But he got his start. I think he got his start as a hip hop producer. Like he did a lot of Childish Gambino stuff. And made the transition to film scores and stuff. And like dude's phenomenal. And like, I love the use of all the different drums in the soundtrack, the way that Killmonger's theme is more obviously hip hop inspired to like show the dichotomy from here's the Western outsider coming into the nation of Wakanda, but with still the African ties. The fucking Dora Milaje theme, the choot 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 choot, like every time you hear that, you're like, oh, Okoye is gonna fuck something up. I was watching last night, and the casino fight scene, I watched that thing back like 10 fucking times, because every time the camera goes up to the balcony where Okoye is kicking ass and it's just the choot 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 choot, oh my god, I don't even know how to like put it into words how fucking awesome that was. I love it. So yeah, there's I really like a lot of this movie. We'll get into the politics of it and all, but I have to admire the craft where it is, and the craft is it's all there. You see it.
There's a couple of standout parts, and I think I'd agree with you. The soundtrack was pretty solid, and the costuming was standout, like easily the best in the entire series, like bar none that we've seen so far, at least.
And I think we forgot to mention Claw when we were talking about Age of Ultron. So I just want to shout him out here special, because I love Andy Serkis. I love his performance. The character in this particular movie was written a little differently than the previous one, but still very good. Love to have him.
I was so happy that they were just like, Andy Serkis, like, go crazy, because we don't have anything else for you for this character, and so he was just like, ah! And I was like, he was like doing weird screams and making crazy faces. I was like, thank you. Like, that's the one. I don't know. One of the things that kind of irritated me about this movie was that there was like two separate characters that were just like, guys, these are like actors that you know and that we want to have like on this, we don't want to like underplay them, but also their roles in previous movies. I think it was like when they introduced Martin Freeman's character, it was like, that's the guy that I did this thing with in a previous movie. And I was just like, oh, come on. Like the fact that you can't like, that the characters can't stand on their own and like assume that the audience will remember them, that they have to be like, oh yeah, this one time, this guy named like Zola
Everett
or whatever,
Ross.
we had to do, or that was the guy's, that was the character's name. But he was like, yeah, that's Everett Ross. He's a CIA guy that I once did a prisoner trade with in the year of whatever. And it was like, okay, come on now. Like,
he wasn't exactly a memorable character in Civil War. And also it's like, this was...
Neither was Claw, to be fair. Like, he's mildly memorable in that it's Andy Serkis.
Claw is very memorable, in my opinion.
He's not. He's there for less than 10 seconds.
In Age of Ultron, he has like one scene and he plays it up very well. And like, honestly, like Andy Serkis is just kind of a treasure. He made
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis directed the best gay rom-com of the last decade. It's called Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And he's also like, we've seen him so much through the lens of like a CGI characters, the mocap stuff. That's what he's known for. Yeah. And I think that's why he was picked to direct Venom too, because, lots of mocap CGI characters. But like the dude is just really good at just acting. Like, just put him in front of a camera and just give us him. Like, fuck, we're going to be doing Andor next. And like, God, I can't wait to talk about his arc.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God.
Yeah, no, he's great here.
I can't wait for Andor.
But yeah, no, I love Andy Serkis. He's obviously having a fun time, and he's giving us performance. He's like, yeah, look, the character's just here. He's gonna die here. Let's give you something to enjoy while he's on screen. And he just chews up the scenery, and it's a delight to watch. And like, also I have to point out that, obviously I didn't make up this joke. I'm pretty sure that the actors themselves made the joke, but like, Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis are the two Tolkien white guys in the movie. Because but while we're talking about strong performances, Winston Duke is M'Baku. I fucking love that guy. He's just so hammy and so over the top. He shouts every single line in a way where you genuinely believe that he will kill you. But it's funny while doing it. I don't know. He plays it very well. And like, I think this movie definitely has, your quippy characters like Shuri, but it's not like to the Joss Whedon level. It's not everyone doesn't quip. Like T'Challa doesn't quip.
It was not. There was not as much quipping.
No,
I think that the frequency of comedic relief in this movie might have been part of what grated on me, because while T'Challa doesn't quip, there is that like explosion thing that happens when he first is understanding the kinetic redistribution of the new suit, and he gets knocked back and he's like, delete that footage. And I'm like, something about that moment is just really irritating to me, and I don't know why. Like, it's supposed to be funny, and yet I'm annoyed by it. And I know that I used to find it funny, which is so strange.
Well, I mean, there's also like another one that like, it's possibly, I think I understand what you're getting at, because there was another scene where I felt similar. There's like a part where they're running through the street and Andy Serkis shoots a laser at a car, and then the only thing that's left is like a Looney Tunes chair, like someone driving it, and they're like, and they're like sliding along, and their hair's all like messed up. And I was like, it feels sudden and very lol so random, and I don't know. I understand what you're getting at. I don't really know exactly how to put it, especially because it's like, okay, this is a Marvel movie after all, and normally these types of things are like every 2 seconds. So maybe it just feels weird because the rest of this movie is so dead serious all the time that like these random bursts of high Marvel like joke or feel like out of place or something, or they are particularly obvious. I don't know.
I feel like it's like slapstick comedy does not work in this setting. Might be what I'm running into, because it does. It's a little bit slapstick. The explosion, and then like you're right. It's so Looney Tunes with it's a oh my God, I can't remember her name. Lupita Nyong'o. She's like in the seat and it's just scooting along. Yeah, Nakia. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but like some of it's more like, I don't know. Shuri, I find her pretty annoying actually too. Okay, never mind. Whatever.
So something about this movie that was like, okay, so for reference, I watched Michael Bay's Ambulance like 3 days before watching this movie, which was perhaps the biggest mistake of my entire life.
Oh, no.
Not really, but it was a big mistake cinematically, because Ambulance is a phenomenal movie. It is incredible. It is unbelievably over colorful, like hyper saturated colors. Everything is exploding with color. It's this movie that is an action movie through and through. Michael Bay going completely psychotic. I am going to literally destroy drones in order to get cool shots. He has like multiple drones get run over by cars. They do like a flip in the air and then smash into a car for a cool action shot. And I'm just like, the action in that movie is so, it's real. First of all, they literally blow up cars and crash cars into each other. And secondly, like, it's so lovingly crafted. And this movie has so many action scenes in it. It has so many punching. They are punching each other. There's a lot of punching in this movie. And all of it looks terrible. And all of it feels terrible. And it's especially notable after I just watched like one of the best action movies, like pure action movies that I've seen in a long time, that also took its themes more seriously, which was like kind of shocking, because everybody, you think Michael Bay these days, you think all of Michael Bay's long run of Transformers movies, which are basically on par with Marvel. And no, but like this Ambulance was so real. It was so legit, and everything. And I was just like, oh man. So the action in this movie, it looks terrible. The car chase looks so bad, and the fake flipping CGI cars and the weird bendy, sproingy, bouncy characters when they're done in CGI on a CGI background, it just made me want to fall asleep. And there is so much of it. There are so many battle scenes and fight scenes that look like terrible. The like martial combat, like the setup and framing around the ritual combat is like, okay, this is a big moment, and it's huge, and there's all this music and there's all this build up to it. And then it's like they pan out to like a shot of these people standing on the waterfall, and it's the worst CGI shot you've ever seen. And then it cuts to this extremely claustrophobic, barely choreographed like punch back and forth, guy punch, guy punch, guy punch, guy hit with thing. He gets stabbed. You don't immediately register who it was who stabbed who. Somebody falls backwards into the water, and then it's over. And then they do it again later, and I don't know. It was so frustrating. So I feel like this movie had struggles with like being overloaded with all this action that doesn't feel good anyway, and it would have been better if they just gave more time to like work on the core issues instead of punching each other. But it has that problem of being a superhero movie, and they always have to do that. And I feel like that was a recurring thing. As we get into the political portion of this movie, I have a lot to say about this being a superhero movie and having to be a superhero movie, because it severely damages, in my opinion, their ability to actually talk about any of the subjects that they bring up in the movie.
Yeah. And I do want to say, like, before we move into the more in-depth, like, thematic things about this, that, like, yes, I also find it difficult. Like, so many times watching these Marvel movies, I space out during action scenes. I've got a dual monitor setup. I'm usually like playing a video game and watching something at the same time. And I just completely check out. It's not on purpose. I just get bored, because I think most action scenes nowadays, and obviously we've talked about these Marvel movies and like the fact that it's just kind of passive entertainment and you're not really meant to think about it too hard. The action doesn't really move the plot forward, except in some notable examples that pop out in my mind, at least. So this movie has the same kind of thing for me, where I get bored anyway. And then if the action scene itself is not even well performed, that's another thing. But Chadwick Boseman actively had cancer during this movie. And so I try to give it like a little bit of slack. That's part of why they had to rely so much on CGI. That's probably a lot of part of why like the action scenes don't play out very well. And honestly, I think that it affects the overall performance too. Just like if you are trying to exude strength in this role, but you are literally like dying of cancer and actively being treated for it, it's going to take the wind out of your sails. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I should also point out that nobody knew he had cancer. He kept that from even the top level producers. Yeah. Kevin Feige was taken completely by surprise when Chadwick died. Like only his immediate family knew. And actually, that's in Wakanda Forever, the sequel. They pretty much just have T'Challa die exactly the same way Chadwick died, and they just kind of treat his death the way that like everybody was dealing with his death. So, like for a lot of that, I'm sure Chadwick knew his limits in what he was doing action wise, but I don't think like the way that everything was choreographed was informed by knowing, okay, our lead star has colon cancer. Let's keep that in mind as we're choreographing this. I don't think that was a consideration.
He just wasn't apparently able to perform like to the level that they were hoping for, given the final result that we have.
I also assume that, I think that it's more, I don't know the structure of these movies, but also like a lot of times in these movies, in the fight scenes, they will use stand-ins. They will have,
he's got a full mask on anyway, you know?
Yeah. So like, they were shot incorrectly. You can have somebody who's not fighting to their maximum and make an interesting fight scene if it's choreographed right. And it's been done in other movies where it's like an actor who's not a martial artist who's able to do a good fight scene just because there's a choreographer who's saying, okay, it can't be punch back, punch, parry, punch back. There has to be stuff going on in the environment. They're interacting with their environment. They're using the terrain. They're using the objects around them. They're, doing an interesting tactic in a fight. And there just wasn't any of that. It was just thud, thud, thud.
I would
thud.
say that the casino fight's probably the best action sequence in the film.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Because
they do use the environment there. But even then, like, so they do the fight like as a quasi one take. There's obviously like, there's like Okoye falls and then gets up, but like somebody quickly moves over the screen and Okoye is in a slightly different spot. So they're like, okay, so there's a cut. But like they tried to do it like it was one take. But also because of that, there's like one bit where like T'Challa is like punching a bunch of dudes before he goes and jumps up to the mezzanine to confront Claw. But like if you're just like the camera's moving a little bit, like so you don't really notice as much, but you're realizing that Chadwick Boseman is standing in one spot and letting people come up to him to punch him that whole time. Like that's it. Just like someone comes and someone comes and he punches them. Someone else comes and he punches them. And I understand why like obviously Chadwick was not, in any shape to be doing massive like choreography or anything like that, and you only see him from like the chest up in that shot, because after he does that, he runs and jumps up the balcony, which I'm assuming what they did is, CGI jump, obviously. But because the camera then goes up, and then like you see T'Challa climb down from the over the railing, but you only see him from behind. I'm assuming they had a stunt performer up there, and then the camera just goes and zooms in on Claw and like turns around him a bit before turning back to show Chadwick. And I'm assuming it's like, okay, the camera is totally on Claw now. Chadwick, run up the stairs and get in position while the stuntman jumps out of the way, or something like that. So like I was just looking at like how they shot that sequence.
Yeah, there were some details in that scene also that made it feel a little more alive that just weren't present in the other scenes in the movie. Like, for example, I was just thinking of this one detail that like stuck in my mind. That he like Claw, I think it's Claw.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I laughed out loud when they said his name, when they were like in this big council in Wakanda, and it was like, this man is Ulysses Claw. And I was like, oh my God, I'm watching this movie. Anyway, but it was there's this part where he picks up like the case of diamonds, and like the bullets hit the case of diamonds, and the diamonds start spilling out of the case, and they're like spraying all over the place while he's running. There's like a little trail of diamonds being left behind him. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like there's some attention to what's going on in the scene and what objects they've got around them, instead of it like the final battle scene. It was like a cool opener with the shield cloaks. And then after that, it may as well have been picked right out of like Attack of the Clones. Like it's just explosions and noise and people going like, psh, 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 and like standing in place in like a big zoom shot. You see like 40 guys like standing in one spot, hitting at each other, all CGI. And I was just like, like turn it off, like fast forward, like get this out of my face. But yeah, at least there was like in the casino scene, there was like, they had tables with cards blowing up and
it was kinetic energy.
Yeah, exactly. There's presence, and there's a space that they're using, and they're doing things in it. And like I think at one point he does like a claw attack, and it hits like a billiard table or something that has like that green fabric on it, and you get like the claw mark in the green fabric. It's like, okay, cool. There's kinetics here. This is interesting. You want to talk about the politics stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. God, this movie is like a resist lib's dream, and like obviously like if a revolution were to happen, I would not want Killmonger leading that shit. But like the movie is still like unwilling to fully question the systems at play. Like their solution where, because like Nakia is intended to be the correct viewpoint character, where she sympathizes with what some of Killmonger's goals, but doesn't want to go out and wage war on the worlds to do it. And she's presented as correct, but like the ultimate solution is to buy up some real estate in Oakland and set up a community center. Is that really how you're gonna fix the world? I mean, I'm sure you'll help out the people in that city. That's great, but like, is that actually like addressing the roots of the systemic inequalities that the movie's trying to address?
Yeah, no, like this movie falls all over itself politically. And it was one of the things I was sitting there thinking about since I watched it yesterday, and I've been thinking about it pretty much nonstop since, trying to figure out exactly how to word the things. There is so much on basically everything you touched on there. And okay, one thing I'll start with that like stood out to me. There was a part in the movie where they're up in the Jabari headquarters, like the big like statue building that's like up in the mountains. And I literally shouted out loud while watching the movie. They had Martin Freeman delivering a line of dialogue at one point, and I just said, they need to kill this guy immediately. They need to throw him off the mountain immediately. I literally screamed that out. Like I was sitting there watching with my partners, and I'm like, kill him. He's like, nah, he's one of our guys. He worked with he's an ex-CIA. He would go.
No, he's not even ex-CIA. He's current CIA. They invited.
No. He's talking about Killmonger. He's like,
oh, right.
He was sent to go in. He would be sent to go in and target elections, changes of power, and topple
They
And he
just
just
admitted
says
that they
it
do that.
casually. Like 3 times in the movie, 3 separate times does Martin Freeman's character just very casually say, yeah, we were just toppling shit. And then he's still framed as a goddamn hero by the end. I'm like,
they take him
him
into their secret mountain full of vibranium. He's a CIA agent. He's going to report, like literally, like Okoye said, it was like, if we bring him here, it is his job to report back to his country what he's seen. And like, it's interesting because like this is, and it's something that I don't think I really picked up on, the recurring theme of like trying to portray the CIA as good guys in the MCU. I think you were kind of turned me on to that, but like also it seems like the good CIA agents are the ones who will just pass out top secret information willy-nilly because we like the main character and they like the main character, so they're willing to, you know, like break like confidentiality for that shit. Because like in Civil War, it was Sharon Carter who, you know, she's like, here's the intel on where Bucky is. I have to give this to my boss, but I'm giving it to you first. And then here is here's Ross, who's just like, oh yeah, no, here's my entire CIA dossier on this guy. I will say that from the CIA's perspective, they definitely want to be backing T'Challa over Killmonger, because, you know, in terms of what serves the US's interests, having a revolutionary armed with vibranium tech trying to start a violent overthrow of the system, that's not in the US's best interest. So at least there's that, but he's still just like being very loose with his top secret CIA intel.
Yeah, actually in the casino scene, there's this bit, I just want to add on really quick. There's this bit where he's like, oh, there is no such deal happening, but if there was, blah, 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 like we would still be going through it. You need to stay out of it, whatever. He like cheekily, he does that. Like, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but
yeah, it's I don't know. Like, this movie is like, it's nationalism pilled in like the most incredible way. It's the most loudest that we've gotten since Captain America, the first one, in my opinion, where it's just like, or maybe the ending of Winter Soldier, where they're like, yeah, but the good CIA took over. And it's just like, okay, come on. Like, think about what you're writing about 1 minute. It was throughout this entire movie, and it was really, really bothering me. Another thing that was like, okay, so you mentioned the Gabefish, you mentioned the like buying an outreach center and building an outreach center. So like, this movie is about Killmonger as a character is mad because there are people suffering all over the world, and Wakanda is basically sitting on a massive treasure and has had 500 years of unbelievable luxury. Every single person in Wakanda can barely imagine the concept of conflict. Like, they're so on top of a mountain of technology that they can't even imagine getting hurt and not having it healed immediately. Like, that's how good life is in Wakanda. And this movie's about how that is. So what they learn, what T'Challa learns from his conflict with Killmonger is that actually that's wrong. We can't hoard all of this goodness because we're killing people even who might be like us. And then his conclusion is the first place that we need to build an outreach is on top of the site where my dad killed Killmonger's dad. Like, we're gonna demolish that building. We're good. Like,
well, he said he's not gonna demolish it, but
he's good. They moved everybody out of it in order to make it another building. It's implied that like they're building something else over it. Like, it's not truly being demolished, but it's like, so that's like, and in America, that's like your first thing. You're like, oh, not like all of the countries that America openly says that they're actively colonizing. In this movie, the guy literally says, yeah, we just did some regime changes. And it's just like, oh my God, it refuses to take any of its own themes seriously. And tying into that, it bothers me that this whole movie repeatedly makes calls to racism, makes calls to colonization, and never, except for outside of one opening weird sand animation, ever actually depicts any of them. The only depiction that we see in the entire movie, and this is really weird thematically as well, is racism, like vague racism. I think 3 or 4 times in the movie, a person goes, "You guys are savages." About
that was Claw, who's a villain.
Yeah.
So
it's Claw, and then there's like there's like 1 or 2 side comments about from Martin Freeman's character. And then at the very end, there's like one guy in the UN who's like, well, what does a
Nation of
what's
farmers. What can they
what's
offer
a
us?
nation of farmers have to do for, what can they do for me? And it's like, okay, like this is not what racism looks like in America. Like it's not what racism really looks like anywhere. People don't just walk up and go like, you are a savage, aren't you? And it's like, okay. And secondly, it's being directed at Wakanda, who in the language of the movie they're not the victims of colonialism. They're explicitly not. They're sitting on top of the wealth and not doing anything about the colonialism or the racism. They're not. So it's weird that the movie's only depictions of like racism, or which the movie is repeatedly mentions but never actually says, like never actually depicts, is towards the people who are not actually in the narrative of the film the victims of such a thing. And it's so weird to me why they would choose to do any of that. And there was one part that is never followed up on that I actually really liked, and it was a line from Killmonger that I wish would have been like actually taken seriously within the rest of the film. So throughout the movie, Killmonger is repeatedly told like, oh, they're going to kill you on sight. You'll be seen as an outsider, et cetera, et cetera. We never actually really see that happen. It's kind of like
we see him show up on the border with Claw's body.
Yeah. We see him like, but they kind of are just like,
conditional acceptance. He just is accepted.
They're just like, oh, good job, dude. You got him. Like, and then they're like, come on in. And then he becomes king. And it's like, so we don't actually really see that born out.
It's not just like that. Like he was like being held, like they did have him in shackles when they brought him to the throne room. He was still being treated with suspicion. It was Wakabi, the head of the border tribe, like obviously he had already soured on T'Challa, and here comes this guy who has done the thing, who has avenged Wakabi's father. And Wakabi was, already like, I mean, he's a border patrol agent, so of course he's like a foaming at the mouth reactionary, very well depicted. So like, he wasn't given like just a huge welcome. Like there was a lot of suspicion around him. Some people were more open to hearing him than others, but to say that he just waltzed right in is not exactly accurate.
It's not 100% accurate, but the point that I was trying to get to with this is the main conflict there is more like the suspicion that he's faced is less because he's an outsider and because he's different, and more because he says, I'm going to burn down your holy sanctum and then I'm going to do a war on the entire world. That's basically most of the reasons. There's not really like, there's no faction or depiction within there that's like depicts Wakanda as xenophobic in any way. However, and this is where the line that I was kind of sort of long ways trying to get to is there's a line at the end when he's looking at the fake sunset with T'Challa, and he goes, my ancestors, were on boats, were carried over as slaves on boats. And some of them had the sense to throw themselves off the side because they knew that living as a slave or living in, I'm paraphrasing obviously, or living as a slave.
Death was better than bondage or something like that.
Death was better than bondage, something along those lines. And I sat there and I went, oh my God, that line right there could have been the most poignant and interesting line because his ancestors were from Wakanda.
Well, I mean,
right?
His dad's side.
American.
His mom was, his mom was an African American. So.
But also, I think the word ancestors in this context doesn't always mean like when Black folks say my ancestors, they don't mean their blood lineage. They mean just those who came before.
Well, what I'm trying to say about the point is that's interesting. The fact that he sees himself, regardless of whether they were literally his ancestors, because you're right, he did. I remember now that he said his mom was American. Whether or not they were, the idea that they were his, because of his experience in life, they were his ancestors spiritually, the people who went through something similar. He lived in this, which we never see on screen, but he lived in Oakland. He says it's bad, and I wish we would have seen that as his life being a struggle in some way. But regardless, that his life, he lived this life of being discriminated and held down and treated poorly in bondage, and he had to find an absolutely horrible way out of it. That's interesting to me, especially when put alongside the pseudo-hereditary monarchy of Wakanda, a hyper-technological, ethno-nationalist, isolationist nation. but that is just never, it's just not followed up on. It's just not actually, they just kind of have that line there because it's like kind of in a snapshot, it's a very interesting line, but thematically it's not really played on. And it bothered me that was the case, because that line is like, it has so much meat on it that just isn't like distributed to the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I think that this kind of falls in line with the more general criticism that this movie has a hard time grappling with its actual themes. Like, yes, we do get to see that in the neighborhood that Killmonger grows up in, they have an egg crate instead of a basketball hoop. Like, they stuck an egg crate to the basketball backboard. But that's kind of it. You don't get to see, like, I mean, I guess you get the general vibe that this neighborhood is not a great neighborhood, especially since when we zoom into the future, that building, I think that the building is empty because
it's condemned.
It's condemned, right? Like, so it hasn't been maintained. But yeah,
and
I think
the
that
kids who see the Wakandan ship, their immediate thought is to break it down and sell it for parts.
Yeah.
Right? So
we do get like a little tiny glimpse of it. But I think that this is part of like, there's a lot of buzzword language that's used where Killmonger says like, well, they didn't have the weapons to fight back against their oppressors. And like, oppressor is a very generic term. You can't really get into the details of what he means by that. As a movie that is a product of a neoliberalism status quo cultural protection project that they have going on, like, it's propaganda for neoliberalism. So like, in order to confront those things and go into detail about it, you're proving further that Killmonger is right. Like, there's so many different things in the movie that make you go, oh, Killmonger is wrong for his radicalism or whatever, but his fundamental point is not wrong if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, and that like the conservative isolationist Wakanda is wrong, but only so wrong as to require an outreach program. They're not wrong enough to require like actual material restitution globally.
Yeah, and that's so on point. And also it ties to the thing that I was saying earlier, where because this has to be a superhero movie and because Black Panther has to be like the good guy in the end, he has to win by punching because he's a superhero.
He wins by stabbing, actually.
He does win by stabbing.
But that is true.
And I appreciate that about him.
You know, but like the fact that he has to win by martial prowess is that you get that exact problem where it's like, oh yeah, like Wakanda can't really be bad. And Killmonger can't really be good. You can't have a Killmonger who makes sense. You have to have a Killmonger who's like, I'm going to blow up the world by sending nuclear weapons to every single person, every single gang and so-called revolutionary on the planet, instead of him being like, yeah, I'm coming to your country where you've been sitting on riches while everyone else suffers, and I'm going to burn everything that's sacred to you because I have spite for it. I'm going to burn your throne and I'm going to spit on the monarchy. Instead, it has to be like, nah, actually, monarchy is great, and it can be good if you just do, sense of research.
Imperialism is good.
The fact that like there's never anything grappled with the fact like, okay, how does Wakanda maintain a monarchical power in this world? It can't purely be because of isolationism. There are tons of Wakandans out and about in the world in secret and semi-openly. So like, how is that power maintained? Is there just no political strife? And the answer is yes, of course there's no political strife because it's a superhero movie. It's a superhero movie. You don't think about that deeply. I
had a thought during the final battle, like in the middle of, this coup, this Wakandan civil war. I'm like, where the fuck are the civilians and what are they thinking about all of this? Because all we're seeing is like the border tribe fighting the Dora Milaje. It's all just like, the people in like the military, the seats of power is, like a high level, power struggle. But like, we had that whole city full of people who are living this idyllic life. And like, they're right at the foot of the mountain that this fight is happening on. What are they thinking about all of this? How are any of them going, Killmonger is not my king. Who the fuck is this guy? Like, none of that is addressed. Like, it's all just high level power play, and we just
brushed aside.
Like, we can't assume that all Wakandans are, the high ups, the tribal leadership, the royalty, the scientists. Like, some of them are just dudes. And what are the dudes doing?
It's like an issue that people have with high fantasy, where we focus on what the kings and the princes are doing, and we don't get to see the material effect on. That's like part of why people like Game of Thrones, because it shows the material effect that it has on people in all stratas of society. But this is falling into that trap where it's like we're focused completely on what's happening at the higher echelons, and none of the rest of the people even really exist.
They literally just don't. They almost
Yeah.
do not exist in this movie, except for to
Yeah.
be set dressings when people are running away from gunfire. Like, there's almost no depictions whatsoever of like the common people of any nation in any way, except for, you know, you get the kids playing basketball, but that's extremely brief and very minimal. It's a thing that annoys me greatly about this movie, and I think that made my brain just go like, oh man, I'm happy that we're almost done with the Marvel world for now, because
Yeah. You're ready to move
it
on.
it hurts my soul. Like, I don't know. I was thinking about like that this movie is ostensibly a movie about liberation, that ostensibly it's you know, and I'm like, but, and I couldn't help but think of, and this is not, and I admit, I know people, you know, I understand this is probably not the fairest comparison, but I thought about the movie Django Unchained, which is a movie that is extremely hyper violent. Like, the solution is extreme violence in many ways, but it's also a movie that is, I can't imagine what that movie would look like and be like, and how empty the narrative claims of the movie would be from a film experience perspective, not from a moral perspective. Obviously, if there was a movie where somebody stood up and said it's good to free people from slavery, everyone would agree with that. But to tell that story emotionally and through film, like, imagine if every negative thing that ever happened to Django in Django Unchained was just told around the fireside when he's having a conversation with the dentist, where he's like, yeah, this bad thing happened and that bad thing happened. And you never actually see it. You never witness any of the brutal systems. You never see him literally suffering. You never see him interrupt the ongoing brutality of these institutions. That's never like depicted and shoved in your face. And so that you understand why someone would be driven to that level of hyper fucking violence. And in this movie,
it relies a lot on like existing cultural knowledge. It relies a lot on people's assumptions, and people
The
are like, well, we already
implications.
have a general understanding. You know, BLM at this point is really kicked up in the zeitgeist and everything, so people have that in the back of their head, and the film is just like, well, we won't touch too deep in on it, because then the Republicans can still watch the movie and have a fun time, because they don't have to think about it, because we're not shoving it in their face, and we can just say the right things, and then the people who are woke will, you know, they'll like, oh, okay, I see that this movie's woke, but they don't actually say anything about it. Like the most direct that the movie really gets in terms of like talking about colonial oppression is when Killmonger is confronting the British Museum, right? And like that's like such an easy layup, and also because it's not criticizing America, so they can, you know, just do it more directly. But that's it, and it really just kind of leaves it to your imagination.
Yeah, even that scene is kind of like, I don't know, the way that it unfolds. The character, they don't have the commitment to their own themes to like have the museum lady be blunt about anything. So instead, it just seems like this guy is just killing a random clerk. You know, like, I'm not saying she's like a super like nice person or anything, but she's not depicted as like an evil person. She's just like, no, we got these, and he's like, enjoy that poison you're drinking, now die on the floor. And you're like, wow.
Well, you also have to remember that Killmonger is supposed to be the villain. Like, they will show him doing bad things.
But they don't have it's the comic book shit where it's like they can't make what he's fighting for make sense, because he has to be a stupid comic book villain. He has to be like, yes. He's like, haven't you ever thought about how you're sitting on all of the money in the world, and you're letting every other person in every other country experience racism and colonialism? Also, I'm going to torture this puppy in front of you, because that's the way we're going to solve this. It's like, come on. Like, oh God, it makes me so mad. And like, I don't know, like, that was just one of the things that was just annoying me so much about this movie, is like, they needed to have T'Challa go somewhere and witness the stuff that his country is hiding from, Make him go to a place that has been devastated by colonialism and have a storyline that is explicitly about how the people in that place were devastated by colonialism, and have it be within the span of like a few hundred years where Wakanda was sitting there. Maybe the scene before he has he goes, you know, he has his magical flower and his dad is talking about like the lineage of their kings and how great they've been doing for 400 years. And then the next scene is they have to go to a country that has been devastated by colonialism. And so in his mind is his dad, his kingly dad, talking about how great it's been for 400 years. And his experience is watching this other place that for the last 400 years, people have not been able to escape abject suffering under colonialism, because colonialism is fucking abject suffering. It's rotten. It's rotten to its core. It's one of the most disgusting things that's ever been wreaked upon the world. And yet it's just left to be like, yeah, we all know colonialism is bad, right, guys? Anyway, superheroes.
Well,
And-
there's also, I should point out, like, okay, so, like, if you're talking about him going out and actually seeing that stuff, like, there was a prime opportunity for him when, like, investigating Killmonger. Instead of just going up to Zuri and Zuri tells him a story, why doesn't he go to Oakland to investigate shit further and, like, see how people are living there for himself and, like, actually depict that? I should also point out, in terms of like that whole attitude of, you know, oh, we're protecting our own borders and fuck everything else, is that the opening action sequence of the movie is Black Panther taking out that like human trafficking convoy because he needs Nakia to show up for a party. And like and she says that he ruins her mission. I assume she was like trying to take down a larger human trafficking ring. And he ruins it because it's like, no, you got to come to a party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of missed opportunities to address that in the film that we were never going to get. Because Disney wouldn't let it happen.
I kind of see there being some value to an extent in a story that shows people and doesn't show the struggle. Like as queer people, you know, we want to be able to see queer people in things. And they don't have like, what is that? There's a trope of like, you have one gay character and then you kill them off.
Yeah.
Like it would be nice, right? So I can understand like this film.
Bury your gays.
Yeah, bury your gays. If you're putting out a film for Black folks, showing them in a situation where like you don't excruciatingly get into all the nitty gritty because they already know, like, so they don't need to see it all over again. I can see the value in that. And I had a second part to that thought. Which
I would just say, you know, I don't disagree with you, but also then just make a movie about a different subject.
Sure.
It's
yeah.
Like you don't have like, it would be like if you made a movie that was about, I'm trying to, you know, build a parallel to like the queer thing. It'd be like if you made a movie that was about transphobia, but that didn't depict any transphobia.
Yeah. Well, but that's not what I think what I'm kind of driving toward is like, that is not actually what this movie is about. Like this movie is not actually about the Black struggle. This movie is actually a Black supremacist ethno-nationalist fantasy. It's serving Black supremacist realness. Like it seems like that's what the purpose of it is for.
What this movie is actually about is about putting another movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Well, sure. Yeah.
That shows.
It's about making money is what this movie is about. To cater to the Black people to make their money.
But it's like, but the movie doesn't like, it can't be about any of the things that are depicted in it because it doesn't have the ability to actually lean into those. Like, I would agree with you that on one angle or one part of this movie is absolutely about a Wakandan supremacist, ethno-nationalist monarchy, hyper-traditionalist, xenophobic monarchy. But it also isn't about that because they don't fully explore what that means. They never fully explore the repercussions of those things. So it's just, that's a thing that's in this movie, just like many other things that are in this movie. And I think that's kind of what bothers me is like, okay, if you want to make a movie that's about that, that's about like, what if there was a hyper powerful nation completely that unlike all of its neighbors were completely untouched by this and had the power to change it and didn't? Make that movie, explore what that means. What it would kind of be a nightmare scenario, wouldn't it? And it would probably build up a lot of resentment. There would probably be a lot of people who had rightful resentment. And guess what? They probably wouldn't come with the first solution of being like, I'm going to kill puppies in front of you to make sure that you know that I'm the villain. and then the other guy wouldn't go and also like be the best guy ever and who never makes any real mistakes. Like it's just, God, yeah.
Just disappointing. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
I'm mad.
There was something that I wanted to go back to. It's not correct directly, but I was trying to find a good spot for it, and I'm just going to force it in now because this is my podcast.
Yeah.
But there was something that I noticed. Okay, so Wakabi, the head of the border tribe, is married to Okoye, the head of the Dora Milaje, and like there's a lot of. It's kind of just incidental in the movie. Like you could kind of blink and miss it. And that's not like fully on like there were a lot of deleted scenes between them that I think they just cut for time. So their relationship just kind of got sacrificed in the service of making a more, action packed movie or whatnot. But I was just thinking, I'm like, here is this like fascist and his like liberal institutionalist wife. And it made me think of that meme, every third hetero couple, where it's like the woman is like, hey, did everyone get that Salon article I sent? And then the guy just has a t-shirt saying the most racist man ever. And it's literally that meme in the movie.
I was like, so this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, and I apologize. Please, everyone who's listening to this podcast, go watch Michael Bay's Ambulance. I think you'll really, really enjoy. I'm telling you. And also,
Michael Bay is not paying us any money.
Yeah, Michael Bay is not paying me any money. I just really like that movie. So there's this line that she says to the Border Patrol guy, where he's like, "You would kill even me, my love," and then she's like, "Anything for Wakanda," and that is, ironically, the literal opposite message of Michael Bay's Ambulance. Michael Bay's Ambulance is a movie where the only time in the entire movie that any character has even a glimmer of like happiness or success is when they decide to deviate from the institutions that they're bound up in. And it's really remarkably on point with this theme. That like institutions as we understand them stand in the way of human connection and human happiness. And like at multiple points throughout this movie, that theme is reinforced really hard. And like, it was just really funny to watch that movie and then go into a movie where the opposite message is delivered, which is actually no, in the institution and the tradition is like, it is the most important thing. And you're breaking it right now. Even if we need to rethink it, you can't do it like that. You can't get too crazy with it. And like to watch Ambulance just a few days before a movie that's literally like, yeah, you need to violate these institutions if you ever want to see anything good happen in the world even once. And it's like, it's wild. I don't want to spoil the movie or get too much into it because it's not the movie we're talking about, but go see it and you'll see what I'm talking about. It was wild to watch these two movies back to back. That line, like, it was just like, I felt the soul leave me and also go, oh yeah, wait a minute. This movie is not in dialogue meaningfully with even the other movies that it was in. This movie absolutely should have come before Civil War. That would have been great. First of all, we would have known who Black Panther was in time for Civil War, and also it would have provided a thematic through line of going, actually no, like Black Panther as the monarch of a sovereign isolationist state has a lot to learn in his own ways about the rest of the world, and maybe there could have been like, I feel like it would have made his final line more earned. It would have lined up with the messaging that Captain America was going on, this conflict between Captain America and Tony Stark, but I don't know.
T'Chaka just had to die, so it's like with the way that the events played out, he died, and then Winter Soldier happened, and then he is dead, and that leads to like T'Challa actually being king in this one. But like, yeah, just like have T'Chaka die at the beginning, and then have Winter Soldier happen like off screen, and we'll watch that movie in 2 years. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Civil War and Winter Soldier could have been the same movie. I still hold that. They should have been one movie, and Black Panther should have happened before that. Winter Soldier, Civil War fusion movie would have talked about and set and like sort of settled the direction that the film was going, which is that, yeah, like people do matter. They can't be controlled completely by the UN or whatever, because those organizations are subject to corruption and they can completely wield power in ways like building an underwater supermax prison that you put innocent people in.
We can talk about like what movie should have been made when and everything, but like this movie literally could just logistically could not have been made before Civil War, because Ike Perlmutter, the racist who's a buddy of Donald Trump, was in charge of Marvel Entertainment. The guy who famously said about recasting Terrence Howard with Don Cheadle that they all look the same anyway.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it was not until Marvel Studios was reorged out from under Marvel Entertainment that they were able to make Black Panther or Captain Marvel or any of that stuff. So yeah, that just would have happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely happy that like the movie was made, and I was happy to see like that they committed to like having an overwhelmingly black cast, and like that's awesome. And a black director, like hell yeah, like on that. And
Ryan
awesome.
Coogler. Ryan Coogler also fought to have his own crew on there, because like I think Marvel just has like, I think they've got like 3 different film crews that they just rotate for whatever films. But Ryan Coogler's like, no, I know my guys. I've been working with them for everything else. I'm bringing them in here. And you kind of like, it doesn't have the exact, like obviously the CGI still has the Marvel problem, but a lot of the cinematography otherwise feels more distinct and more of its own thing.
It does.
But we are over an hour now, so let's wrap everything up here. Moss, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best summed up as I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. I do want to shout out Sterling K. Brown, just because I really love him as an actor. I think he's pretty spectacular considering how minor his roles tend to be. He was Njobu, for anyone in the audience who doesn't know who I'm referring to. Yeah, he does the voice of Angstrom Levy in Invincible Season 2, and I like him a lot. He's one of the standout performances for me, so I just want to give him a shout. Overall thoughts, yeah, this helped clarify a little bit what some of my issues with this movie are. It's overall just like, again, with all these movies, like you could have said something interesting, and you stopped short of saying something interesting, and that's kind of a bummer. And it's aesthetically very pleasing and pretty shallow, and that's about it.
DemonMama?
Yeah, I feel fairly similarly, but also I this movie really hit me with the fatigue of the superhero movies, because it was just like, oh man, this really is like one of the most visible, where it's like it so clearly doesn't want to just be a superhero movie. It so clearly has things that it wants to say, and it can't. It can't because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It can't because of the restrictions of the production. It can't because it's a damn superhero movie. And that sucks. And it makes me go, yeah, that's why I kind of hate this shit. And, you know, I'm negative about these movies a lot, but this one really, I feel like, lays it out in one movie why I'm like, ugh, it's a shame. It's a shame that you can only invoke the like specter and the awareness of certain extremely negative and very real things as sort of set dressing for your superheroes to punch people on. And I don't know, that's a bummer. And it's not, I should be clear, it's not that like you have to have the most raw depiction ever. Like I think of a movie like Avatar or a TV show like Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is a kids show that deals with a ton of serious issues, and they don't really have literal depictions of killing or death all that often. They do sometimes, but it's a movie that takes those subjects seriously, and it's a show that takes those subjects seriously, and it finds a way to analogize and deal with them and grapple with them from a framework that even a child can understand. And it does that because it has a boldness and a commitment to what it's talking about. And I just want to be clear, that's what I'm saying. Anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts on Black Panther.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed listening to 3 white people shit on this movie.
Yes.
And we will assemble next time for Infinity War. I'm looking forward to that. I think that's probably one of the strongest entries in the MCU. So I'm very curious to see how much DemonMama hates it.
Which one?
Infinity War. So
okay.
You
said it's the strongest?
I think it's the strongest. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes. Anyway,
are we gonna watch? Maybe we should watch Infinity War and Endgame in a single setting, and that way we can like accurately replicate the rushed feeling of the ending of most of these movies thus far. We can like, have a final podcast that's just like us rushing to do 2 movies at once.
No, they're such different movies. They are like, it was originally pitched as like, oh, Infinity War parts 1 and 2, but no, they each deserve their own podcasts. We're gonna do that. You're not getting out of it this easily.
We're taking the high road to Marvel's low road.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. I've been Gayfesh.
I'm Moss.
And I'm DemonMama.
And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.